Hello, everybody. I'm Skip Alzheimer, and welcome to the avgeeks Lunchtime streaming show, direct from Santa Paula, downtown Santa Paula, California, in 1929. I'm not quite sure how I ended up with this film, and I've been trying to do research to figure out when it showed up. I have a feeling that it showed up with a batch of stuff that I got from a dumpster that somebody raided back in the day. It was a film production company, Goal Productions, of which I've shown some films from, including that amazing tire rigging demo. But anyways, I have a feeling that when I got this was a print that was struck from the original 1929 print, so the film itself was actually a dupe. And so you saw some of the titles got cut off because of the way they printed it. So my theory behind this, because I've seen many films like this, is that this was shot by an itinerant filmmaker or a company. And basically what they would do is they would approach a town or a city and say, hey, we want to film here. And you can highlight, for a certain amount of money, what we'll do is we'll highlight your town or city, and then they would approach the different retail places and say, we would feature your drugstore, your general store, your tire shop, your car shop, dealership, for a certain amount of money. Then they would produce it, film it, then show it. They would book a theater or book some sort of community center and charge admission, and everybody could see themselves on the screen. Especially, those shots where they showed all the school kids coming out. So in North Carolina, there was an itinerant filmmaker named H. Lee Waters who did this. He did this all over North Carolina and in Virginia, in Georgia, and South Carolina. And so he would do this. He would go for a week. He would shoot stuff, go back to where he lived, I believe in Salisbury or Kannapolis. I can't remember exactly where it is. It's in the middle of North Carolina in the Triad-ish area. And he would produce it, cut it up. Then he would take it back and promote this show. And what he did unintentionally, while he was showing, he was making money basically during the Depression because he was a wedding photographer. And during the Depression, basically all that money dried up for wedding photography. So he was basically doing this to make ends meet. And so besides the fact of people seeing themselves on the big screen, he also unintentionally documented parts of North Carolina and these other rural areas, these little towns, that nobody else has documentation of. So it's really quite phenomenal. And we've digitized a bunch of stuff from that collection, which is now at Duke University and the State Archives in North Carolina. But yeah, it's kind of interesting. He would set up his camera outside of a school, and all the kids would parade past. Then he would set up outside of hosiery mills, and all the people, when they were going off shift, they would see themselves, and those would be all potential people that could pay money, admission, to see themselves on the big screen. And I think he realized that kids was the most profitable, but because he could charge for kids, he could charge for parents, and he could charge for grandparents to all see themselves on the screen. So what a racket. But it's pretty cool to see all that stuff. This next film is, because we watch films here, we watch old 16mm films. This next film is something I have on the telecine over here. You can see set up. And this is part of Screen News Digest, which was Hearst company would produce these kind of newsreels for the classroom. And so they would take a certain topic and they would basically, to distribute it to the schools, they would get sponsorship by different regional or local businesses. And so you would see a commercial beforehand. We've seen this with the science news, the screen science news, which is by Allegro. they did the same model, but it was all about science, and it was skewed later, like probably 70s. And this, I have some from the 50s, I think, up through the mid 60s, as you'll see this next one is. So this is Man and the Atom.
Your local pet dairy, producers of quality fresh homogenized milk, ice cream, and other fresh dairy foods, brings you the Screen News Digest. In plants like this, Pet Dairy processes a complete line of fresh dairy products for your health and enjoyment. Strict laboratory controls by trained technicians assure the quality goodness of all fresh pet dairy products. Quick delivery on modern refrigerated trucks by your friendly pet salesman guarantees the freshness of its products from the dairy to you. July 16th, 1945, the Alamogordo Desert in New Mexico. To this place, on this date, have come General Leslie Groves and J. Robert Oppenheimer, a military man and a scientist, to witness the birth of an awesome new creation. Atop a steel tower stands history's first atomic bomb, and under strictest secrecy, 1,000 observers have gathered at Los Alamos for the final fateful countdown. Later, General Groves will speak of the climactic moment when mankind entered the atomic age.
We feel words inadequate to describe the effects of this bomb. It had to be witnessed to be realized, and it is the universal hope of all present that no American citizen will ever witness it on United States soil again. The light of many suns, the tremendous ball of fire, the shock and sound, and the formation of boiling clouds were all beyond human experience.
3 weeks later, on a Pacific isle, an American B-29 takes on a single atomic bomb. Its code name, Fat Man. The crew is well briefed about their target and their cargo. And on the morning of August 6th, the aircraft takes off for its rendezvous with history. The mission underscores dramatically the words of H.G. Wells. Human history is more and more a race between education and catastrophe. Target city is Hiroshima, population 310,000. Under a clear summer sky, Hiroshima cannot know nor dream that its tragedy will mark the beginning of the end of World War II. 8:15 a.m. The bombardier releases his deadly atomic device. In the twinkling of an eye, 70,000 people are killed, and the heart of the city is leveled to the ground. Weeks pass before the dazed survivors in the stricken city know what has happened to them. A solemn President Truman announces the atomic attack.
A short time ago, an American airplane dropped one bomb on Hiroshima and destroyed its usefulness to the enemy. That bomb has more power than 20,000 tons of TNT. It is an atomic bomb. It is a harnessing of the basic power of the universe. The force from which the sun draws his power has been loosed against those who brought war to the Far East.
A second bomb is dropped on Nagasaki, and on August 14th, Japan surrenders. After the war's end, Bernard Baruch comes before the United Nations with an American proposal for international atomic control.
This is a treaty that is meant to be kept. This is to be a program for which the world has striven through all recorded history and even before. For man in his soul is peaceful and life-loving. Deep inside of him, he knows that he can live in security only by the force of law and never by the law of force.
The U.S. treaty is based on strict enforcement, international inspections, and no veto. Andrei Gromyko, speaking for the Soviet Union, rejects the terms of the American proposal. Thus begins more than 18 years of debate and disagreement between the two great powers on the control of nuclear weapons.
Решению, которое было принято Генеральной Ассамблеей 2 дня тому назад.
The atomic dilemma becomes the challenge of our times, and a ghost town in the Nevada desert called Survival City emphasizes the consequences of failure. Houses are populated with lifelike models and stocked with real food. Civil defense officials have erected buildings of all types to learn of their capability to withstand an atomic blast. Troops are moved into trenches within a mile of the nuclear device, closer than anyone has ever been to the site of an atomic explosion. Tension mounts as the GIs wait out the countdown.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The shuttle will arrive in the control point area in approximately 45 seconds. Please stay in position until after the shuttle has passed.
Sights and sounds of the atomic blast light up the sky and rumble across the desert. Spectacular motion pictures record firsthand, for the first time, the incredible destructive power of nuclear energy. In Soviet Russia, in the years after World War II, the challenge of the atomic age is the challenge to build as quickly as possible a successful nuclear device. With the aid of German scientists captured during the war and held as prisoners in Russia, with atomic secrets smuggled out of the free world by Soviet spies, the top priority project moves surely, steadily toward fulfillment. 1946, 47, 48. The years, the months, the days dwindle down. (1949). Russia becomes an atomic power. America's monopoly is ended. The next nuclear breakthrough takes place 5 years later on an obscure island named Alujilab in the far Pacific. U.S. scientists place history's first hydrogen bomb, nicknamed Mike, in a tar paper shack. Remote-controlled cameras are set up to film the explosion of a device with a power of 20 million tons of TNT. The closest ship is 5 miles away. Here is power strong enough to wipe the island of Alujilab from the face of the earth, great enough to provide civilization with an abundant and undreamed of better life. Addressing the United Nations, President Eisenhower makes America's position very clear.
My country wants to be constructive, not destructive. It wants agreements, not wars, among nations. It wants itself to live in freedom and in the confidence that the people of every other nation enjoy equally the right of choosing their own way of life. So my country's purpose is to help us move out of the dark chamber of horrors into the light, to find a way by which the minds of men, the hopes of men, the souls of men everywhere can move forward toward peace and happiness and well-being. The United States pledges before you, and therefore before the world, its determination to help solve the fearful atomic dilemma, to devote its entire heart and mind to find the way by which the miraculous inventiveness of man shall not be dedicated to his death, but consecrated to his life.
The United States supports President Eisenhower's words with deeds. Working through the United Nations, America makes available uranium and fissionable material for peaceful purposes. Dozens of countries are given the atomic keys that open the doors to dynamic advances in the fields of medicine and industry. In countless ways, the miracle and the might of nuclear energy touches and enriches the lives of growing numbers of people around the world. Atomic energy is harnessed to propel ships, supply power, advance medical research. But not all research is peaceful. England enters the nuclear arms race and follows a familiar path. In 1957, Great Britain becomes the world's third nuclear power. The fourth is France, which achieves its first nuclear explosion in 1960. Hurrah for France, says Charles de Gaulle. From this moment on, she is stronger, prouder, a great nation in every respect. And then, thunder out of Asia. Communist China takes its place among the nuclear nations of the world. While the UN struggles to find some effective formula for disarmament, the atomic powers carry out more than 200 nuclear tests in 4 years. Finally, in 1958, Andrei Gromyko, representing Russia, and Averell Harriman, the United States, reach agreement on a moratorium in atomic tests. It will last 3 years. In 1961, Russia breaks the moratorium and explodes a super bomb, equal in power to 50 million tons of TNT. Adlai Stevenson, American ambassador to the United Nations, rebukes the Soviet Union for its action.
As he said he would, Mr. Khrushchev has exploded his giant bomb in cynical disregard of the United Nations. By this act, the Soviet Union have added injury to insult. They broke the moratorium on nuclear weapons testing. They have raised atmospheric pollution to new heights. They have started a new race for more deadly weapons.
And so a new round of testing begins. An underground explosion reveals a dramatically different look at atomic power. Once again, man and his world live in the ominous shadows of nuclear fallout. Then suddenly in 1963, Russia proposes negotiations on a partial nuclear test ban treaty. And in 1 week, Premier Nikita Khrushchev accepts an agreement that his country has blocked for 18 years. The treaty outlaws any nuclear explosion in the atmosphere, outer space, or underwater. Secretary of State Dean Rusk signs the historic document for the United States. Andrei Gromyko, a veteran of disarmament negotiations, represents Russia. And Alex Douglas Hume, England. Later, more than 80 countries will sign the pact, but France and Communist China will not. Still, the treaty is considered a step toward peace, a step away from war. In 1967, when Alexei Kosygin comes to the United States and travels to Glassboro, New Jersey to meet President Johnson, the foundation is laid for a second step on the road to nuclear disarmament. At the Holly Bush Summit Conference, the leaders reached tentative agreement on a new treaty to halt the spread of nuclear weapons. The proposal would seek to perpetuate the present nuclear weapons monopoly of the United States, Russia, England, France, and Communist China. It is the one area of agreement between the President and the Premier. The official proposal is submitted to the 17-nation disarmament conference at Geneva. It requires all nuclear powers to promise never to hand such weapons or weapons know-how to any other power. And nations with no atomic weapons must promise never to manufacture or acquire them. As negotiations proceed, mankind watches and remembers, perhaps, the prophetic words of President Kennedy.
Never have the nations of the world had so much to lose or so much to gain. Together we shall save our planet, or together we shall perish in its flames. Save it we can, and save it must. And then shall we earn the eternal thanks of mankind, and as peacemakers, the eternal blessing of God.
Atoms for peace or atoms for war? The challenge remains in the atomic age. The living history of the Screen News Digest has been brought to you by your local pet dairy.
So thanks, Pet Dairy, for sponsoring that. So the deal is that those are, like I said, they're like newsreels, but they're not really current, super current. Although I do have some that deal with things like Cuba, the Cuban Missile Crisis, President Johnson. Some current stuff, things like about Vietnam, where they do a focus on a certain year, which those tend to be more contemporary when they were made. But this one looks at, is spanning 20, 25 years, looking at the atomic bomb, basically. Not talking about using it for energy production or things like that. This is all about treaties and political maneuvering and all that stuff. So it's kind of interesting, but I very much love the assembly line footage from PET. And that's something, I think I did one of these Screen News Digests, or Screen News Science News. I'm just going to have to get that. I always confuse the two series, but they're very different. I showed one, and then somebody commented, like after I showed it, basically saying like, I remember seeing this, but it was an earlier one, and it was sponsored by somebody totally different. Well, the thing is, like, this was all regional, so the advertising was different depending on where you saw it, like what school you were in. So I have a bunch of Screen News Digests from Fayetteville, and they're brought to us by the fine Pepsi bottlers in Fayetteville. And depending on, and so this one I think was from South Carolina. I know based on the can that I got it from University of South Carolina. They were getting rid of a bunch of stuff that wasn't really applicable to their collections. And and I noticed like on the little license plate on the pet milk truck, it was a SC. So this was the South Carolina thing, and it might have been different parts of South Carolina had different advertisers. So this is kind of a cool way to get this kind of regional advertising and to see these things in an unexpected way. And this is why we have to watch these films, is because we never know what's going to show up in them. Like, you know, if I looked at the title, Man in the Atom, I'd say, well, this is all about atomic either research or atomic weapons or whatever, and wouldn't realize that, wow, there's a pretty nifty pet dairy ad in there. So this is why we watch the films. This next film is, I like this because it is made for a very niche audience. And I feel like this is people that work for AT&T, although I could be misremembering this. But it's all about telephone directories. Remember those? The phone books? This is about them.
James Weston, Miss Barbara Pierce, Madison Smith and Brown, Mrs. James Dixon. Just names. But what's in a name? Well, that all depends. A name may be an organization. This building is the home of one. A name may be a member of that organization, any one of us. Or a name may be one of our many customers. Names are accurate and priceless identifications of individuals and organizations. Our telephone directories are filled with such names. The names of people who respect our reputation for prompt, accurate, courteous service. These names are a major concern to all of us. In fact, they are the reason for the existence of our company and the many different kinds of work we do. Each name is important. Take the name Sarley, John B. Before this particular name got into the directory, it caused a good deal of trouble. To go back a bit, Mr. Sarley came to our city to look for a job and took a small furnished apartment with the hope of having his wife join him later. His field is statistical research, and he was interested in getting a job with one of the industrial trade associations. In order to keep in personal touch with the contacts he was making, and so that they could reach him, he decided to have a telephone installed. So he called the telephone company and was connected to one of our service representatives.
Miss Ferguson, may I help you?
Yes, I'd like to have a telephone installed in my apartment.
Yes, I can arrange that. May I have your name, please?
The name is Sarley, S-A-R-L-E-Y, John B. The address is 5623 North Capitol Street, apartment 101.
She recorded Mr. Sarley's order, but failed to verify his name. The mistake in that one letter made a big difference to Sarley and to us. Mr. Sarley got his telephone without delay. His first call was long distance, to his wife. Then a day or two later, he ran into an old friend, Bill. It was a lucky break for Sarley, because Bill had heard of a new job under discussion in his organization, a trade association. Bill made a note of Sarley's telephone number on his newspaper and promised to contact him later. Bill told his boss about Sarley's excellent qualifications. His boss told Bill he already had a man in mind, but would hold off if Sarley would come in and see him right away. But Bill had inadvertently thrown away his newspaper with Sarley's number and couldn't find John B. Sarley in the directory. So he called information and asked for Sarley's number. The information operator checked her listings.
I'm sorry. I find nothing listed, sir.
Bill insisted, but it wasn't there. And that was that. he had to tell his boss that he couldn't contact Sarley. You can guess what happened later. When Sarley didn't hear from Bill and finally decided to check with him, he found that the job had been filled. It just couldn't wait. Sarley was not very happy, to say the least. He called us immediately and was connected to another one of our service representatives. She looked up the original records, and there it was, Farley, not Sarley. Obviously, the name had not been verified properly. After making the correction, she verified it using key names.
S as in Sam, A-R-L, E as in Edward, Y as in Young, J-O-H-N, and the initial B as in boy.
She then prepared a correction, and it was sent to the service order force for action there. A further check for accuracy had to be made by the directory compilation people. But that was only the beginning. The snowball of corrections and additional work had just begun to roll. A correction had to be included in the work going to the printer. The printer then made the necessary changes so that the new listing would appear in the directory and on information. Another directory clerk had to verify the listing in final form. Another verification card was mailed out. The original one apparently had gone astray. The accounting department had to destroy its incorrect record and make a new one for billing purposes. And the plant department had to change its records. But our customer had lost his chance for what might have been just the job he would have liked. He also lost his confidence in us, and we were put to unnecessary expense just because of one bit of inattention. We were able to correct the listing just before the directory went to press, the only good break we had. But we won't need good breaks if we remember, verify all listings. Spell back every one, even the so-called unmistakable ones. There are many similar sounding letters. B, D, P, and V. C and Z. F and S. I and Y. M and N, and so on. The only way to be sure of them is to use key names, such as boy, David, Paul, victory, and so on. Always print the name using capital letters. Check. All of this may give you some idea as to what's in a name.
Poor Mr. Sarley. His life was ruined, and he no longer trusted the Bell Company. So he went with a different telephone company in the future. No, wait, that was impossible because they were a monopoly and you couldn't go with anybody else. I think early telephone etiquette and things like this really kind of spell out the importance at the time. And it's something that we've kind of forgotten because we have cell phones and we have different carriers. We have different ways to communicate with each other. And, how it was all under one roof before. It was AT&T and that was it. Or there were some smaller kind of regional companies across the country, but, they were in charge of giving you a phone, giving you the equipment, which you didn't own, you actually leased, and, also having you listed in this important document, this phone directory, which was, if you remember the jerk, how excited the jerk was. I can't remember his name. When he found his name in the phone book, he suddenly existed as a person, and that's something that we kind of forget. So it's kind of fascinating. All right, so one of my favorite film companies is the Moody Institute of Science, because it's just barely science. It's a platform for them to talk about God and how great God is. And so they show this beautiful science footage. They talk about science to a point, and then they veer off and talk about God. So here is one that's it's not about science in particular, but it is kind of. There was a couple of films in this series called Debt to the Past. One was about government history. This one's about language, and it's kind of a historical look at language and how important it is. And let's see if they hold up their end and somehow mention God or Jesus or the Scriptures or the Bible. So here's Debt to the Past, language.
In euren Fäusten halten müssen!
The power of language, for evil or for good, is the foundation for every other power that man possesses. Within language lie the magic forces of emotions, habits of thought, traditions of culture. Language is man's oldest and most priceless heirloom. It gives him the power to imagine, to reason, to dream, to create, and to communicate all this to others.
Go ahead. Mark control in our contact report, Richie.
All right, put us in a reverse charger, too.
Look now on the rubber and into his windup. 1-0 pitch to drive on line drive.
The power of language. But what is language? First, there are the various tongues.
मुझे यहाँ आए लगभग 6 महीने हुए.
150 millones de habitantes hablamos el español.
wird von etwa 100 Millionen Menschen gesprochen.
ምናልባት የዛሬ 2 ወር ሳልመለስ አልቀርም.
Imin lezus hairene yevchors million.
મારું નામ જશવંત પરીખ છે.
Every spoken language is made up of sentences. Sentences are made up of words. Words are made up of syllables, which in turn are made up of phonemes. Phonemes.
Keyword, chair. PH. Keyword, some. SH. Keyword, shoe. CH. Keyword, chair. PH.
Of course, we also use unspoken language, gestures, actions, signs and symbols, many as precise and eloquent as the spoken equivalent. Much of our communication, some say as much as 50%, is in wordless language. Of course, the idea of unspoken language, and in fact many of its most useful expressions, are debts we owe to the past. But even at best, unspoken language is limited. Ideas can be better and more clearly expressed by spoken language. Languages are related like the branches of a tree. New languages constantly grow out of old ones. How many branches altogether? 100? 200? No, sir. The people of the earth speak some 3,000 separate and distinct tongues. Why so many? Partly because of isolation, living apart from other people, partly because a people's language reflects its unique character, its attitudes, its ways of life. Consider, for instance, the Indians of Mexico. For many of these tribes, corn is the basic crop and the basic diet. For this reason, they have many names for corn, depending on its stage of growth or state of preparation. Corn on the cob boiled, corn on the cob roasted, corn on the cob dried for storage. The Indians have many names for corn because their whole way of life is based on corn. But with us, other things are more important. For this reason, we have many names for such things as types of buildings, and forms of transportation. In this way, each language meets the special needs of the people who speak it. Of course, spoken language is common, but in many places, written language is rare. It's a startling fact. Almost half the world's adult population can neither read nor write. Because of this, men and women lug notebooks and tape recorders into the far corners of the globe. They are dedicated to the great task of bringing needy people the marvelous gift of reading and writing in their own language.
This is a foreign concept to them entirely, the pruning of either trees or plants.
Evidently that way.
For man to go forward, he must be able to communicate and to receive communication. Written enables man to pass on to others what he has learned, so that new learning may be built on the old. Scientists generally distinguish three stages in the history of writing: pictographic, ideographic, and phonetic. A pictographic sign is merely an agreed-upon symbol for some object. With the American Indians, a fish, a tree, a man. These pictograms were chiseled into rocks, traced on animal hides, woven into blankets, painted with colored sand. But with pictograms, man could write only about objects. He wanted to go beyond this, to write about ideas, qualities, and actions, things that could not be portrayed with simple pictures. So in many places, pictographic writing became ideographic. In ancient Egypt, for instance, the pictograms for water and for man were put together to form the ideogram thirst. You see, an ideogram is a combination of two or more pictures, intended not to represent simple objects, but to represent ideas. Egyptian writing, called hieroglyphics, was both pictographic and ideographic, but soon it became phonetic as well. How did this happen? Let's look for the answer in a simple puzzle called the rebus. In English, for instance, this picture and this picture make the word catalog. Here's another. And one more. Used this way, these are no longer pictures of objects, they are pictures of sounds. Each picture is a syllable, a phonetic sign. In Egypt, when over 600 pictures had become phonetic signs, the Egyptians could write any word they could speak. They could write about feelings and emotions and ideas, belief, treason, love, hate, fear, beauty, goodness, and much more. But when Egypt crumbled, the art of writing and reading hieroglyphics was forgotten. Centuries passed. Men studied the hieroglyphics, wondered what they told of the religion, the science, the history of Egypt, but no one could unlock the secret. Then, in 1799, a startling discovery. Near the mouth of the Nile, soldiers and workmen of Napoleon Bonaparte found a large black stone, later called the Rosetta Stone. It carried the same message in 3 kinds of writing. The bottom section in ancient Greek, the middle section in simplified hieroglyphics, and the top section in standard hieroglyphics. By comparing the 3 sections, the secret of reading hieroglyphics was rediscovered. Once ancient man learned that in place of writing with thousands of pictures, he could write faster and better with only a few hundred syllable signs, the invention of alphabetic writing became possible. Syllable writing spread quickly from the Egyptians to the Semites, and the Semites made a vital improvement. They realized that spoken language has many more syllables than it has phonemes, the basic sounds of speech. So, instead of using 600 or more syllable signs as the Egyptians had done, the Semites found they could write even better with only 22 phoneme signs. In other words, they invented the alphabet. At Byblos, in the Semitic land of Phoenicia, proof of this has been found on the coffin of King Ahiram, who ruled the city 12 centuries before Christ. On the lid is an epitaph in letters thought to be direct ancestors of our modern alphabet. Many of these people were sailors and merchants. From Phoenicia, they developed a vast network of trade routes. Everywhere they went, they carried alphabetic writing with them, and it wasn't long before other people learned the secret. By the year 1000 BC, the Greeks were using an alphabet based on Semitic models. The letter forms were changed, perhaps to make them easier to write, perhaps to make them look better. The Phoenician Aleph and Beth became the Greek Alpha and Beta, from which, of course, we derive the word alphabet. The spread of writing to all parts of the civilized world was aided by the invention of paper from papyrus, a reed that grows along the Nile. Paper was easier to write on than stone or clay, and much more portable. The merchants of Byblos imported paper from Egypt and sold it to Greece, just as we call the kind of tableware which first came to us from China by the name China, so the Greeks called paper from Byblos by the name Byblos. From this root, we have the word bibliophile, a lover of books; bibliography, a list of books. When the Hebrew scriptures were copied on paper, the scrolls were known as the Biblia, or as we now say, the Bible. So it is that in popularizing the use of alphabetic writing and paper, the Semites left us a heritage reflected in every book we read. And the little town of Byblos has lent its name to the most influential book in all human history, the Bible. As for the Greeks, they now had tools to preserve for us their great works of literature, science, and philosophy. The Romans also learned the alphabet. They carried it on their march to conquer the world, and they spread it like the measles. Our debt is to the Romans for the shape of capital letters we commonly use today. What does the alphabet mean to us? Why, you use it almost every waking moment of every day. Every time you write your name, type a letter, read a book, or a newspaper, or a street sign, or a billboard, or a menu, you are using the alphabet. We learn through language. We express ourselves with language. And we use language in our mind to explore our memories, to recall our experiences, to test our perceptions, to develop new concepts and ideas. Yes, the very act of thought itself depends in large part on the skillful handling of words. Learning the techniques of communication, to read rapidly, to write clearly, to speak effectively, is basic to everything we are or may become. For each of us to improve himself, to go forward, and to make worthwhile contributions to our society, we must learn to communicate and to receive communication from others. Only in this way may we claim and use our heritage from the past, a heritage of knowledge and culture, of dreams and hopes, of history and experience, expressed in language, recorded in writing. Language is power, power to build and power to destroy. We have good reason to fear the destructive power of language. It is for us to use the power of language wisely, to wipe out illiteracy, to spread the knowledge of freedom and righteousness, to promote friendship and understanding among all peoples. Will we do this? Whether we do or not depends on what kind of individuals we are. If we are personally committed to the highest moral and spiritual values, these values will guide our use of language. And we will have a share in making language a dynamic force for good in the world around us.
Thank you, Moody Institute of Science, for not letting me down. For a while, I was like, we got Hitler in there. I don't see the Bible hasn't shown up yet. And then at the end, the little parting thing about maintaining a moral and spiritual life, how that will affect your language and how you use it. There we go. That's what we were looking for. Big fan of Moody Institute of Science, and that narrator was not Dr. Irwin Moon, who shows up in a lot of my beloved Moody films. That was another narrator whose name I cannot remember, but I found his name in the research that I did. I did an article with Professor Dr. Marcia Gordon, and we talked about Moody Institute of Science, and so and found out the different phases and how it started and all that stuff. So 1962. Thanks everybody for tuning in today. Thanks Dan Strebel, who kind of peered in, and it was on Facebook, and he actually, if you liked the that Santa Paula film that I showed, he put a link in here. Let me see if I can get the link. He put a link to the H. Lee Waters, and I'll put that in. What a nightmare! I'll put that in the YouTube comments as well. So maybe this will get me to where I need to go. Yeah, here we go. here's H. Lee Waters. But yeah, join us tomorrow for more films, as always. If you like what you saw, you can always buy us some delicious coffee. Caffeine is a glorious thing that stimulates our nervous systems. And also, you can hit like and subscribe and notify, and go to avgeeks.com and see other stuff that we've digitized. But otherwise, join us tomorrow, 1 o'clock. And we'll bust out some more films. And we'll see where the world takes us. I kind of like this. Not sure where we're going to end up. Not sure where we're going to start. But it's fun to be on a journey with you and to kind of see all these films and learn a little bit about this, learn about that, etc., etc. Everybody, take care. And as always, as I click away to all the different little things that I click away to, we look inside the film can to give us advice, and it says, please rewind and to love each other. And so that's pretty good advice. Everybody take care, and I will see you tomorrow.